I think we'll wait just 2 more minutes here and then we'll get started, folks. But while we're waiting those 2 minutes, I just posted the link to the Google Doc in the chat. And in that document, I added, I'm trying to get you a page here. Down under today's section on page, of course, I can't see what page it is, but down after the heading that says Thursday, October 26th, I looked at the calendar and kind of mapped out some potential dates. During our first meeting, we had talked about meeting every 2 weeks until that February deadline. And so I mapped out some days, potential days that we could meet. If you want to take a look at those versus your calendar, because I'm hoping we can decide on some days today. Although we probably have to do a poll, as I see we're missing a good chunk of folks from the committee. Lucas, did you get any messages from people about not attending, or? I did not.
I also did not. I didn't get 100% confirmation on if this day did work for everybody, but hopefully some more will pop on, and if not, I'll be sure to send them all the links to the recordings if they need it.
Perfect. All right, well, I think we should get started. As I mentioned, the link to the Google Doc is in the chat. I think what I'm hoping we can do over the next few meetings is really dig into the writing of our recommendations. And I know that sounds a little backwards, as we have not necessarily discussed them. But I think in the process of saying, well, what do we need to report out on? It helps us to frame what we need to discuss, and topics of interest will emerge, or topics that need to be addressed will emerge as we look at that. So for today, I wanted to review some of the material that's available for us, and then really spend most of the time talking about an outline. And I put together a straw poll outline of kind of what I thought that report might include. And it's not meant to be exhaustive or our final version. It's really just something for people to respond to. But before we get started with that, so that's the goal in the near term here, is to start digging into some of these issues more intensely. So before we get started, though, looking at the resources and talking about scheduling a little bit, I'd like everyone to just introduce themselves again. We had some folks who couldn't join on the first call, and I apologize for the multiple reschedules of this meeting. I've been dealing with some family medical issues the past month. So introducing myself, I'm Jamie Vaudry. I'm the research coordinator at the Connecticut National Estuarine Research Reserve, which is a new center at the University of Connecticut. One of the main focuses of the reserve is eelgrass and also aquaculture. So a very fitting work group for me to get involved in. I've been at UConn and Marine Sciences for about 15 years, working in water quality and eelgrass. I'm going to pass the mic over to Tessa next.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tessa Getchis, and I work for Connecticut Sea Grant and UConn Extension. My responsibilities include working with the aquaculture industry in Connecticut and the local, state, and federal regulators. And I'll pass it to Zach from our office.
Hi, everybody. I'm Zach Gordon, also with Connecticut Sea Grant and the NOAA Milford Research Lab down in Milford, Connecticut. And my role is to connect the Milford Lab staff to Extension, Sea Grant Extension, and other extension professionals across the region, and working in shellfish aquaculture to better connect the research of the lab to aquaculture practitioners. And then I'm guessing I have to pass to someone. I will pass to Larry.
Hi, Larry Dunn. I'm the chair of the Town of Groton Conservation Commission. And we're, after a variety of other topics, we're now working on our plan of conservation development, which is once every 10 years with a main emphasis on sustainability. And we're down here on the seashore, so you can imagine this topic does have an element of relevance. And I'll pass it on to Greg.
Hi, everybody. This is Craig Tobias. I'm also in the Marine Sciences Department with Jamie at UConn. So I'm wearing that hat on this committee, but I also serve, excuse me, on the Groton Shellfish Commission, which we oversee some of the leases for aquaculture in southeastern Connecticut. And I think that's why I am on this committee. Oh, I'll pass to David Carey at DABA.
Dave, I saw you unmute, but we don't hear you. I heard a computer ding, but we still don't hear you. I think Dave is having microphone problems. Why don't we go to Lucas next?
Hi, everybody. I'm Lucas. I'm the administrator of this working group. I serve as the interim clerk of environment. I also do outreach for a couple of our senators, and I do graphics and digital. So happy to be here with you all.
How about
I was gonna say I can popcorn to Brad or
Yeah.
Good afternoon. I'm Brad Towson. I'm the LCO attorney for the Environment Committee. So I'm here to sort of just guide on procedural matters. So I'm not sure if there's anyone else to sort of throw it to other than David Carey if he's on the line.
I think we have Hillary and then CTN.
and Griffin. I don't think Griffin's introduced himself.
Oh, and Griff, yeah.
CTN is just gonna record. I'm not sure that they're
Oh,
capable of
okay.
introducing themselves.
Then why don't we go to Griff next?
Hi everyone, I'm Griffin Harris. I am a student of marine science at Magnet High School. I'm a senior this year, and I first want to apologize for my absence of the first meeting. I had school, but I think I'm here to voice my opinion from a younger generation, just to see what's going on. Thank you.
Thanks, and over to Hillary, and then we'll see if we can get Dave on.
Hi, everyone. I'm Hillary Descaraccio. I'm Senator Lopes' aide, and I'm just here to listen and report back to him. All the great work you guys are doing.
Great. And Dave, do you want to give it one more try? Still no sound. All right, well, hopefully we get Dave's voice in the mix here soon. I am going to share my screen. Always share that one. And I need just a moment to reorganize. All right, so I think what we'll do is I'm going to ask Lucas just to poll the group on potential dates for our next meetings. But with the group here, do any of these dates stand out as bad for you and should be struck from the list? I did not list all available dates. I kind of picked 2 dates per week, per target week, trying to move them around just a little bit. All right, I'm not hearing any objections. You'll certainly have another chance when we poll the whole group about these as potential meeting options. Our goal, just to give a brief review of the charge here. Hold on, because I've lost access. There we go. Our charge is to develop strategies for the preservation and restoration and expansion of eelgrass across our states, within the state of Connecticut, where we have been asked to look at information from neighboring states, including New York and Rhode Island, and also review the materials that have been developed here in Connecticut and Long Island Sound, and identify ways forward for eelgrass restoration in Connecticut. We can make recommendations on locations. We can identify barriers to restoration. In fact, that's a good thing to do, is say, these are the barriers. This is how we might work through them or around them. And then also make recommendations for funding. So where do we see needs, either in on-the-ground restoration activities, or is there something that we need to know before we get to that restoration piece? In this working document, so this is the working document, the Google Doc that is kind of pulling together notes. You're welcome to add things to this and add comments or directly to the text. It kind of, the idea is that we're capturing what we're thinking about as a group and as we're moving forward. There are 2 links in this document to our work group website. And then Lucas just sent this out again this afternoon. This is a direct link to a resource list. So this is where a lot of resources are being pulled together. I wanted to take about 15 or 20 minutes to look at some of the tools that are available to us as we're thinking about the environment where eelgrass is existing, how it overlaps with aquaculture in our state, and how it overlaps with other uses of the environment. Like what are the multiple uses of this place? So I wanted to just introduce a few of these mappers and tools and some reports. But if you are familiar with these mappers or tools, please feel free to jump in and take the wheel in terms of providing an overview, especially if I am missing cool features about some of these. So it's actually been a little while since I looked at these, so we're going to see what we get here. This is a mapper in Rhode Island. A lot of these, you go to the website and then you can open them in a map viewer. Move this guy. So again, we are supposed to look at what other states have done in terms of their restoration efforts, their mapping efforts, and their policies regarding eelgrass restoration. So here we are in Connecticut at this is Westerly and Pawcatuck. And the black places, the black outlines are the locations of eelgrass throughout Rhode Island's waters. So they're dealing with some similar issues where their coastal areas that are well flushed by the Atlantic Ocean tend to do better in terms of eelgrass. And then if you look at Narragansett Bay, the black is generally in that lower portion of Narragansett Bay. And as you move up northward in the bay, they've lost a lot of their eelgrass, largely due to nutrient pollution issues up in the Providence River. So that was a quick look at one of the viewers. So the 2012 Rhode Island Aerial Survey Report and 2021 Rhode Island Aerial Survey Report, they're called the Rhode Island, these are the Rhode Island's aerial maps. I'll reference Connecticut's in just a minute, but it is a map, it is a report on the mapping effort that was conducted in Rhode Island. It includes some of their eelgrass acreage, but it also looks at their SAV change. So this is the percent change in the coverage over time. And this is based on 2 years of data, in this case, 2006 and 2012. They have some figures in here and some analysis of that change. So as part of our report, we do want to highlight or summarize the trends that we're seeing in neighboring states, because it provides context to the change that we see in our own state. An example would be there was a die-off a few years ago of eelgrass across New England. I'm trying to remember the exact year. I want to say it was 2021. Someone who was working in beds throughout New England noticed, hey, it's not just Connecticut that's lost acreage, it's Rhode Island and Massachusetts and New Hampshire and Maine. So understanding what's going on that regional scale helps us understand the variability within our system to know whether it's just Connecticut and Long Island Sound, or is this a region-wide thing that's happening. So that report that I just pulled up was the 2012 SAV mapping. They also have a 2021 mapping, which includes more data. Let me see if I can find. Probably not going to be able to find the distribution here easily. There we go. So this is the total acres in 2012 versus 2016 versus 2021. So we are seeing variability. And then in 2006 in Narragansett Bay, for example, they've seen a slight increase. One of the questions whenever I see data like these is this change meaningful? We know that eelgrass grows in area and then contracts in area on an interannual basis. So this year we might lose eelgrass just because that's how it grew this year. And next year it may double or triple naturally. So there is some increase and decrease of the bed sizes. And that's always one of my questions is this a meaningful loss or a meaningful gain? And the short answer is we don't have quite enough data to figure that out or to know that. But I think that's a potential research question. This is a little clearer. If you go from about 600 acres and you get down to about 281 acres in kind of a steady decline, that to our human brain seems to suggest a trend. But again, is 200 acre loss meaningful over that time period? So that's one of the things we want to look for in some of these reports. What are they thinking about it? How are they interpreting it? So that's kind of a brief summary of some of the Rhode Island work. We also have work that's occurring in New York. There was let's see if I get there. The Seagrass Protection Act was passed in New York. I want to say this was a while ago, in 2014. And so that's something that we should review. Connecticut does not have a similar Seagrass Protection Act, at least not that I'm aware of. We have policies that that protect eelgrass, that policies of DABA and DEEP that protect eelgrass, but we do not have legislature or acts that specifically protect eelgrass. So that's something to consider. Is it something that we need? I don't know, but it's something that we can discuss as we look through that information. And then coming out of New York's Seagrass Protection Act, they did establish a seagrass task force. See if I can get there. But this task force has been largely inactive for a while. I think, well, this actually went into the development of that act. But there is, there are reports and summaries that came out of this task force, kind of reviewing what was done in that New York area. The other thing, I don't think I put it on here. Sorry for scrolling quickly, but I wanted to just see. New York does have a seagrass coordinator. That position has been vacant for a number of years, but they've just hired a seagrass coordinator in New York. So that's also someone that we could reach out to and say, hey, what's New York doing now in terms of their restoration policies around eelgrass and how they are looking to increase restoration, but then also address those use conflicts in the environment or use challenges in the environment. So I'm going to pause there. Any other thoughts on Rhode Island or New York, anything that people know of that I may have missed in this summary, or anything that springs to mind immediately?
Hey, Jamie, Larry Dunn. I guess one of my observations is that this group, or our group, is not chartering or doing any original research. It's review of existing data and information.
That's right.
Okay, all right, just double checking.
Yep. And I think what we can do as a group is identify questions that remain unanswered. And it may be that in our group, we think they're unanswered, but then we can go and ask other groups that are working on this, and say, hey, do you know about this topic? And we may get some information back. So I think our charge is really to look at what the neighboring states have done and plot a course for where we think Connecticut should go, so that we can help to guide the priorities around restoration. Any other thoughts on Rhode Island or New York? Any knee-jerk reactions to anything that was shown?
Yeah, hey Jamie, it's Craig. I got one. So you kind of alluded to looking at use conflicts in other states. I mean, I think two things come to mind. One, it might be useful to see what's actually, codified in their statutes in terms of, you can't do this around eelgrass.
Yep.
And the other is what kind of guidelines and permitting is established in Rhode Island and New York for conducting surveys or restorations.
I agree. Any other thoughts? All right, I'm gonna switch over to what's been happening in Connecticut. We do have our own mapping that has been conducted in Connecticut. And let me just open this up. So the mapping in Connecticut was previously conducted by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And you can see they're still involved here. Suzanne Patton is with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. It was conducted by Ralph Tyner, and I am forgetting the other person's name right now, but it's in the previous report. So they did all of the mapping up until this 2017 survey where Michael Bradley took over as a consultant. So while he's from URI, he is mapping our eelgrass here in Long Island Sound. And I will pull up the study area real quick. So this is the black is the coastal boundary of Long Island Sound. And the photo mosaic shown here are the areas that they fly. And those are areas that are known to have eelgrass in them. If we were to get eelgrass sightings westward into the Sound, you know, getting over towards Bridgeport or over towards Port Jefferson on Long Island, the theory is that these surveys would then be extended to capture those. They talked a bit about storms in this report. I'm looking for, thought there was a table with the change. There it is. So if I'm reading this correctly, this was 2002. I think I'm. Yes, okay, so 2002 survey, a 2006 survey, 2009, 2012, and 2017. And so we do have data for these places. Mike and his group kind of condensed them or grouped information into zones. So New London East, Fishers Island, New London West, etc. And let me just, I don't think I have a map of those, perhaps down below. But what we do see is change. So from 2012, we do see some change in the data set. This is actually intersection. Here's the change down below. We've had some gain, we've had some loss, there's some uncertainty, and there's some gain and loss that has not been assessed. But between the 2 years, I think we're seeing a, they compared 2012 and 2017, and they're saying that there's a loss of about a little over 1,000 acres. So, these reports, there's a lot in them, and there is a map viewer, but also some extracted photos. So you can go in and look at each of the individual beds. These are point samples which were conducted in the area. This is what I was mentioning, the New London East, and then Fishers Island, New London West, and kind of Orient Point were the major areas for eelgrass. There is a viewer associated with this, and you can go in and look at change over time and look through this report. So again, this is something that we'll want to summarize, you know, what is the relevant information for us, not doing the data analysis ourselves, but more looking through these reports and picking out what is useful or most informative to the folks that we are writing for.
Jamie, I have a question for you. So I noticed the 2012 layer has spatial extent, but it also has high, medium, or low density or coverage. And I didn't see that with 2017. And I was wondering if that's available.
Yes, it is not available, unfortunately. Let's see if I have a map here.
I'm just wondering, because when we talk about loss, I'm wondering, you know, have we lost beds that were sort of already on their way out, very low density beds, or are we losing healthy high density beds, or do we not know that?
It's a great question. And the short answer is we don't know it. It was only, I was trying to find the map where that had it, but I think it was only the 2002 survey that divided it into high, medium, and low density. So it's not just 2017. I think it's also 2012 and 2009 that don't have that data for us.
I think I have 2012 shows it.
Okay.
But not 2017. And I don't have the others in front of me, but just looking at the last two.
Yeah, I know that not all of them have it. And so just to make everyone aware, in this report are references to the earlier reports. And there should also be a viewer where you can go, here's a web map, the final eelgrass digital delineations. And so this is an interactive map. And then the other one is to the link. And what I don't know is if they have the other layers here. Let's see. I think they might only have 2017 in here, it looks like, perhaps. But there are some other viewers that we're going to look at that do include the other years. But in 2017, when we made the switch from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service into Michael Bradley's team taking on the mapping, the methods did change. And they analyzed the area, but they did not get the density out of the 2017 data. I don't think there's plans to do that for this upcoming survey. They were supposed to fly an aerial overflight this past summer, and because of the bad weather, it's been delayed until next summer. So we have a pretty big gap between 2017 and 2024 in terms of data. What Mike does have is video imagery of the bottom. So when they went to ground truth these areas, he has camera surveys through some of the beds. So there's the potential to go back and pull some of that data out, but it was not analyzed in that way. Not for us to do. That's like that's a big job. That's not a small job. So the other thing that I wanted to show here is the Aquaculture Mapping Atlas. And there is another aquaculture mapper as well. But in Tessa, let me know if I'm talking about the wrong thing. I'm pretty sure that there is an eelgrass layer in this one. Maybe?
There
Yes.
is. So
Yeah.
you found it. There you go.
Yeah. So there's the 2020-12 bed, 2020-12 beds, and then the 2017 beds are shown in gray. So, so if you look here, I'm going to zoom into this area. The gray is the 2017 bed, and the green are the high, medium, and low of the 2020-12 bed. So you can see the change. I'm toggling 2017 on and off just to draw attention to it. And you can also see, for instance, this is Mumford Cove here. In 2017, we have reduced eelgrass in that area compared to previously in 2012. And just, I'll share, but Mumford Cove has lost even more eelgrass. It's now basically north of this line here. We were not able to find eelgrass the last 2 summers. So, so we do have this mapper, and there is one other mapper. And of course, we are able to make our own maps as well if we want to map out different aspects of the mapping. All right, I love maps. I will stop talking about it now. Any other thoughts on mapping or anything that we feel we need to include? I think that that's a pretty straightforward one, and I'm not seeing anyone speak up. All right. All right, the last thing I wanted to mention before we get into looking at the outline is the Eelgrass Collaborative. So at our last meeting, I can't remember if it was Bill or if it was me, we talked about the Long Island Sound Eelgrass Management and Restoration Strategy. It's now available online. At our last meeting, it was not yet available online. It is now available. And I will add a link. I think I sent it to Lucas and it's in our resources. But this document was written, actually, if I pull it up, let's see if it's here. So this document does a really good job of giving background. And I'm just going to zoom to that real quick. And I think in terms of what we're looking for in our report, you know, we're not going to write a report that goes into the background of eelgrass and its importance in global ecosystems. This report really gets at that, and it does a nice job of identifying, you know, what is the benefit of seagrass, how it fits in the ecosystem. And it also does talk about some of the economic value of having seagrass systems. So when we're looking at our own report, I think we want to pull or lean heavily on some of the background that's in this report, just so that we're not writing the same report again. And also ours is going to be considerably smaller. I think this is a 64-page document. So it's a great document. I would recommend that for looking at the background for eelgrass in Long Island Sound, this is a great resource. It does talk about climate change impacts on eelgrass and goes into, I felt I just saw some of the temperature impacts as well. So I'm not going to go through that document, but it is a good resource, and it is in our resource list. As part of that document, though, as part of that eelgrass management and restoration strategy, there were a few key tasks that were identified. One was to create an eelgrass collaborative. The eelgrass collaborative is a group of people that have been invited to the collaborative. It is open, so if you want to join or if you know people who you think should be invited, you can contact me and I can get an invitation out to them. But the collaborative is funded by the Long Island Sound Study, and it's being overseen by Katie Lund, who is the training coordinator at the Research Reserve where I work. I'm on the collaborative as well as a number of other folks on this call already. But the goal of the collaborative is really to bring people together and do some professional sharing. Actually, I wrote them right here. Professional sharing, identify and remove barriers to restoration. So really talking about how do we stimulate restoration of eelgrass in Long Island Sound. And then there are a few very specific activities that are identified for the collaborative to engage in. Before I go over those very briefly, I want to mention the collaborative meets, I want to say 4 times a year. 3 of the times are online and 1 of the meetings will be held in person. What happens at those meetings, they're usually 2 to 3 hours long. And there is usually a presentation by someone on whatever topic it is that is being discussed. And then there's a discussion period. And at the end of the meeting, there's professional sharing. So that's a time when people can say what they've been doing in terms of eelgrass restoration, like on the ground work or plans that they have in place, things that they need to share. The group includes people from state agencies, academia, and non-governmental organizations, as well as just people who are interested in the topic. So the other things that the collaborative has been tasked with, beyond this professional sharing and kind of identifying those barriers to restoration, they are providing, that group is advising on an eelgrass habitat suitability index model, also called the EHSI. And what that model does is it tells us where eelgrass restoration is likely to be most successful. So it's a map and it takes into account environmental factors and says, okay, if you want to plant eelgrass, try here. Don't try over here because of, it's too hot or too wavy or the sediment is too mucky. And so it guides restoration efforts to where they'll be hopefully most successful. These last three are really about working with partners. So that's one of the big parts of the collaborative, is to bring partners together. And the collaborative itself, Katie Lund and our technician and grad student Emily Watling are spending time talking to people in state agencies and in different programs around Long Island Sound to get into how we move restoration forward. So 4, 5, and 6 is about working closely with DEEP and Connecticut's Aquaculture Permitting Work Group to discover what potential conflicts are between eelgrass and aquaculture, or concerns between those two. The collaborative works closely with New York State Department of Environmental Conservation and the New York State Seagrass Task Force to look at what that task force is doing and hopefully, again, move it forward. And then work with all of the Long Island Sound Study partners and the other regional estuary programs like the South Shore Estuary Reserve and Pectonic Estuary Partnership to, again, do this scientific sharing to help move restoration forward. So that's what the collaborative does. Again, it's a group that any of us could join if you're interested. The strategy outlined a few other key tasks. So that's the collaborative, that's one task. And then these other are tasks where the strategy calls for additional funding or additional effort to be put into these topics. That includes updating that suitability index, that map that guides where restoration is most likely to be successful. They wanted to enhance water quality monitoring, but also add human activity monitoring and eelgrass monitoring in a more substantive way. So we're doing a fair bit of water quality monitoring in Long Island Sound. We could always use more. The human activity this was an initiative that was started by the folks out on Fisher's Island, and they started mapping where people are boating and anchoring, or where people are fishing in the water, where people are interacting with the water and where there's the potential for disturbing eelgrass with our activities. The third is eelgrass monitoring. The recommendation by this that came out of this strategy was that we go from the aerial overflight every few years, every 3 to 6 years, to every year. And they suggest dedicating funding to do that, but then also enhancing monitoring by adding different types of monitoring. So diver surveys or camera surveys to enhance our understanding. Getting back at what Tessa was saying related to that high, low, and medium, not just where the eelgrass is, but how it's doing. Coupled with that, they want to continue and enhance remote sensing surveys. So this is satellites and drones was really the focus of that one. An analysis of historic data. So where has eelgrass existed in Long Island Sound in the past? And then some experimentation to look at eelgrass resiliency to climate change and what they call a common garden implementation. And a common garden is where you take seeds from other locations. So perhaps from Rhode Island and New Jersey, you move them here to Connecticut and you see if they do better, by introducing a new genetic strains to Connecticut, do we increase the chance of success of eelgrass beds in Connecticut? All right, so that's an overview of kind of the collaborative. That was the first part, and then some things that this management and restoration strategy highlighted. These are the things that they highlighted as needs. So the next step is we're going to talk about the outline for the report. So we're on time here, but I want to take a moment and see if there are any thoughts about the collaborative. Do we see ways to potentially tap into things that they've already done or might be doing, both in this restoration strategy, but also that the collaborative is doing? Any thoughts on potential interactions with this collaborative?
Yeah, Jamie, I had a question about the collaborative. I mean, it seems like, their breadth is pretty impressive. And the kind of information that they would generate just seems ideal for us assimilating that information into recommendations. My question is timing.
Yeah.
Are they scheduled to have any reporting products or anything within the time frame of this working group?
I will ask Katie and Emily what they have planned. I don't think so. I think that unfortunately before that end of January deadline, I don't think there's going to be a lot coming out of the collaborative.
Yeah, right.
With that said, I think if there are things that are a priority to us, like I kind of view the collaborative and especially Emily's involvement in it. Emily was brought on, she's basically full-time working for the collaborative to pull together material and talk to people. So I think if we went to Emily and Katie and said, wow, we would love to see a review of, eelgrass regulations from the New England states and maybe from the mid-Atlantic states, that's probably something they're going to do anyways. And if we say any chance we could get it soon, they might be able to bump that up.
Yeah,
in their workflow.
So it's going to have to be sort of a, an informal exchange of information, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
I do think it's an opportunity that we should take advantage of.
Yeah, if the timing was a little bit different, if we were lagged by, a year.
Yeah.
And they had some products that were out, it seems like it would be just a gold mine of information for us to distill down and take what's relevant for our sets of recommendations.
Exactly. Yes. Any other thoughts? All right. So my thought.
I
go ahead.
I apologize. I don't mean to interrupt. Just kind of on that, there is the possibility, and we certainly would have to speak with the chairs of the Environment Committee in particular on it, of continuing the working group for another year. I think that I guess my suggestion would be to report out what you can report out by the time frame that you currently have. But you can also make that as a recommendation to continue the group, especially to try and yield some benefits from the collaborative and what they may have to offer on the subject. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Brad. That's a great suggestion. And I could see us, requesting, we get our report. We need to deliver something by February 1st. And our report might have the inclusion of, perhaps we take a break of a few months, or we meet, every 6 weeks or every 2 months, as the collaborative is generating their results from their conversations with people around Long Island Sound, with a goal then of coming back and saying, okay, let's, as our working group, review what's come out of the collaborative and refine our suggestions or update our suggestions. So potentially, depending on the timing that Katie and Emily have for products, we could, put together a plan for how we might update and revisit some of our suggestions. I like that idea. Yeah. All right, so let's take a look at the outline for the report. And again, these are just, I threw this into an outline very quickly of things that I thought made sense to include. So this is totally up for additions, revisions, deletions. And the other thing I want to say is I think it's key. So I'm talking to myself here. I think it's key that we keep the report short. If any of you are familiar with my reports, they tend to get lengthy. So what we want is something that is concise but informative and gets to the point. And that's why I was saying, you know, especially when we're talking about this current knowledge, this history of Long Island Sound, the mapping results, and that eelgrass management and restoration strategy, you know, that's more of a summary with references to the other documents that go into much more detail. So let me do a quick tour through this, and then let's start taking it apart a little. And what I'm hoping is that we can get some people to say, hey, I know that, I have that, you know, in the back of my pocket. I know how to talk about the history of Long Island Sound policy. So we can start to hopefully identify people that this is an easy fit for them to summarize these topics. And just 2 more seconds here. So my goal is then that if I were to say, okay, I'm going to do the history of Long Island Sound policy review, then at our next meeting or a future meeting, I would give a brief overview of what I found on that history of Long Island Sound's policy, looking at New York State and specifically in this case. So kind of a current knowledge, potential barriers to restoration, suggestions on funding needs, and suggestions on any policy or procedural needs or clarifications. Maybe I should add or clarifications. With the history, you know, we want to look at Long Island Sound policy. There is the New York State Task Force and Seagrass Liaison. I just realized that I already know that we need to look at Rhode Island and New York seagrass policy for restoration and protection. Review those mapping results and the change analysis that's been done in Connecticut and kind of compare to Rhode Island, I think is a good place to compare to, possibly to New York South Shore, if there is data there. I actually don't know if we have much on New York South Shore or Peconic Estuary. Review of issues identified in that Long Island Sound study, eelgrass management and restoration strategy. So that's kind of like the current knowledge, you know, where we stand right now. But then getting into potential barriers to restoration. One of those is identification of suitable areas, the techniques used to restore Long Island, to restore eelgrass. There are different planting methods, you know, kind of a review of some of those, or and then we get into what I really feel is the meat of what we're supposed to address, which is, you know, what are these last pieces? So what is the siting and permitting of planting? You know, obtaining eelgrass. What are the policies around where we source our seeds or source our plants from? And then planting of eelgrass in the environment. You know, we can put a plant in the ground, but so the physical act of planting eelgrass is fine, as far as I understand in Long Island Sound, but where you put it matters. And so these should probably be divided up a bit more. But the co-location of restoration with aquaculture, but then also, are there other conflicting uses in eelgrass restoration? For example, we would not want to plan a restoration activity in the middle of a mooring field where we know that that it is a heavily used mooring area and mooring anchors have an impact on eelgrass. And then our final suggestions, these kind of come out of other discussions that I hope we will have on funding needs and anything that might need to be clarified or updated in our policies. So that was my initial thought. Please feel free to open the document and add in, change text, add in comments. But I'd like to talk about this a little bit. We have about a half an hour left. I am right on that, right? I'm not making us stay longer. I think we're 4:30. Yep. So, so thoughts on this outline. Are we missing things? Is there anything that we want to start talking about right now? Anything that stands out as going to need more research on our part, more, where our members might need to dig into more information or talk to people?
Hey, Jamie, Larry Dunn again. Being the, I guess, the non-scientist in this crew. One of the things that the assumption here is we're not having to restate the benefits or why we want to grow the seagrass acreage. Is that assumed, or should there be a short section on, hey guys, here's why it's of interest to the state of Connecticut?
No, I think, Larry, you're right on, and I just forgot it. In fact, I think that's probably one of the most important sections of this. We need to make a compelling reason for why it matters.
Okay,
Yeah.
so again, and that second point, I guess I'll get mine all out. And this is from, I guess I spent most of my time on land in terms of carbon sequestration projects and getting more land or trees planted, et cetera, et cetera. There's a whole cottage industry, if you will, or maybe more than that, on carbon sequestration credits.
Yeah.
Now, knowing that from what I've read, seagrass actually pound for pound or acre per acre has a greater carbon sequestration factor than trees. Is there the potential, or is there any known work that would add seagrass to that whole carbon credit environment, which would then kind of motivate people or businesses to support seagrass in order to get the credit, in order to do other things? You know what I mean? It's non-scientific, but it is a way of getting stuff done.
Yeah, I agree. And I was just adding here, I think Emily Shumshenia, and I definitely spelled her name wrong. I feel like she might have done some eelgrass, exactly what you're talking about, the economic valuation of it. I think the other thing to check into is the Governor's Council on Climate Change. I know I was on a working wetlands group for that, and it was terrestrial, but I wonder if we can look at specifically the idea, like, what did they come up with for carbon credits? Carbon credit discussion, and then perhaps take what we can find on the value of eelgrass as carbon sequestration and kind of compare it to some of those upland habitats, exactly what you were talking about, Larry. So I think we have some work that we can pull from to do that piece of the comparison.
Yeah, Jamie, there's a National Academies report that came out last year. It's pretty good, summarizing marine CDR, carbon dioxide removal.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure macrophyte biomass has got a good section in it. And it covers not just the science, but also some of the economic foundation of it.
Yeah.
And I mean, NOAA's all in on this. So yeah, it's a great suggestion there. And it's part and parcel to that preamble. Well, I think it's part and parcel to the preamble of, ecosystem services is justification for why we care. But I think there's also room in the report for developing a little bit more, at the economic side of recommendations. I think that absolutely resonates with another population, another audience.
I think so too. I think you gotta put it into terms people understand, and that is showing that eelgrass is not just about, giving fish a place to live, I guess. There's a lot more for us.
Although, Jamie, this is a minor point, but I think framing it as a habitat rather than single species management is more along the lines of what natural resource managers are moving towards. So I think that's, an important lens to look through with this final report, and not just for the benefit of the fish, but the other human benefits that we derive from it. And one thing that struck me that you were talking about before was when they were engaged in the project in Fisher's Island Sound and mapping uses in and around eelgrass. And I know that there was concern about prop scars and things like that. But it did cause some concern among the boating community. So, on the outreach side of things, I think that's beyond our scope, but something probably that the Long Island Sound Collaborative should, maybe we could make recommendations to them that engaging the community early on is really important as we start to do more work looking at habitat uses or other types of uses in these habitats, so that we're not getting people fired up and worried that they're not going to be able to anchor at beaches or shellfishing areas or whatever it may be. That this would actually potentially bolster their use of those areas if there were more eelgrass. So I didn't see any of that sort of outreach in our report.
Yeah, I feel like that's its own section, I hate to call it outreach and education because we call everything outreach and education, but I think I
Well, maybe
liked how
just
you said
community engagement or
engaging
something like that.
the
Yeah.
community, early and often. And of course, I can't figure out how to make Google's indent work, but I will. So engaging the community, I think that if we could come up with specific recommendations for engaging the community, not just go out and engage the community, but I think exactly as you were saying, if you're talking about putting it in a location, having a plan for sharing why eelgrass is important, why monitoring is occurring, why restoration is occurring, but then also allaying fears. I think that anytime we do something in the environment, there is a concern that we're going to be keeping people from doing things. Like, when we established the research reserve, there was concern that people wouldn't be able to shellfish in the area or dive in the area or boat in the area. I actually had a bunch of divers show up at a meeting and they're like, are you going to keep us from diving where we want to dive? And I was like, no. And they're like, okay, great, we're all done. So that recognizing that you have to communicate, I think is an important piece of this. Yeah. Other thoughts?
The only thought I had, which I haven't reviewed this in great detail, but I just want to make sure because so much of our conversation seems to be about the topic of restoration. And I want to make sure that the charge of that includes preservation is also addressed. And I wasn't quite sure if I heard that or not, but if it's in there, please forgive me. But anything about preservation and not that there are any silver bullets, so to speak, but anything that goes to that is, I would say, also important. Thank you.
Yeah, very good point. And I don't think that made it in here. I feel like that's almost another section. And I think that's things like reviewing current policies for preservation. We would probably want to this is in CT and neighboring states. And probably, getting into those best practices for preserving what we have.
Right.
Yeah. And I kind of see this tying back to that community engagement piece.
Absolutely. In terms of behaviors to be incentivized, discouraged, and
Yes.
penalized or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like so I have, let's see if I have it on here. Nope. It's on my other water bottle. The Fishers Island Seagrass Management Coalition has a educational campaign going on right now where they're doing like they hand out stickers and hats and shirts and talk about it's their Look Before You Drop campaign. So they're encouraging people to look down and try not to drop their anchors in eelgrass. Things that reviewing some of those other activities is probably, a good idea to show examples of small actions that can have an impact. Any
Jamie,
other, go ahead.
oh, no, just while you're on that topic of best practices for preserving, I mean, you can make the argument that watershed nutrient management is sort of at the core of this, but is that beyond our charge here?
I don't know if it is beyond our charge. I think it's a key point on the stressors on eelgrass. And I wonder if, we talk about, does that come in under current knowledge, or maybe there is a stressors section, which then leads into things like preservation, or, as it combines stressors and how to mitigate them. So I'm not sure where to put it or how it goes in order, but I think if we talked about stressors, we definitely have nutrient inputs,
Sediment
temperature,
management, yeah.
physical.
I mean, it just seems like everything that we always talk about in terms of water quality management is, right, I mean, it's central to minimizing, bed loss.
Yep.
Right. I mean, we kind of saw that this summer.
Yes. And maybe it belongs under current knowledge, but I think it comes before preservation, because now we've set up, these are the things we need to work against to mitigate, to preserve the eelgrass. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
I have just a quick little organization kind of thought.
Yep.
I feel like we jump right, if we have it organized like this, we jump right from preservation to potential barriers to restoration. Maybe just having like a preservation section, then a restoration section, and then potential barriers is a subcategory under that. That makes sense.
Yes. So maybe like. Oh yeah, because even looking at this is not potential barriers to restoration. It's mostly.
It's mostly just like, yeah, efforts in restoration, what
Yeah.
we should be thinking about. Yeah.
Almost feel like these then go in a level. Maybe. All right. I think at this point, I'm looking for suggestions on how we proceed. So our next meeting, if we're looking at, I'm gonna zoom up, sorry for zooming here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We basically have 6 meetings, really 5 meetings, because this is just a review, a final draft, basically. Before the report is due. So we really have just 5 meetings left. What do you guys think of the idea of having people present on some of these topics? Is that a good way to proceed? How do we want to make this report come together is the question.
Yeah, Jamie, I was thinking possibly, at this point, just seeing if there's any volunteers for writing assignments.
Yeah.
Like I would be happy to tackle the different restoration methods, for instance. And I guess I could either report out on that, at a subsequent meeting, or distribute, a few pages of text in advance to that, as sometimes people don't know what they hate until they have something to hate,
Yes.
right? So, but I don't think that it's ever too early to try to get stuff down on paper.
I think that's exactly right. I like the idea of getting something on paper so that people can look at it, but then also, leading a short discussion of what was covered in that area. I kind of expanded and I just put you on restoration overall. But what what we could ask is for people to come into this document and kind of say, oh, I'm interested in this topic or that topic. We're not going to get through all the topics next meeting. So this is not, it's not quite that quickly.
But since we're missing a lot of folks here, I mean, if you tried that strategy, you have this outline and
Yeah.
you can distribute it and say, we're looking for volunteers to take some ownership of some of these sections. Anything near and dear to your heart.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I like that idea. And I think we should proceed with that. And if someone wants to pick up something small, that's great. If someone wants to do a larger section, great. And then I can certainly fill in with picking up some of the things that are not being addressed. So I think what we should do is, Lucas, when we send out the poll for, for the next meeting date, we also direct people to kind of sign up for some topics. And let me think about it for the night, Lucas, before you go and send it out, because
Yeah,
I
no,
might
that's
come up with
awesome.
a better way to like get people to sign up for topics. So let me look at this and think a little more about how we might parse those topics
Yeah.
to make it a little easier for people to sign up for something.
Okay, cool. We can do that. And then just show of hands or whatever. I mean, do we want to right now 8th or 9th of November? If you guys wanted to voice your opinions for that, that would definitely be a good place to start, since there is at least a number of us here today. But would love to preliminarily have the date for the next meeting.
One just clarifying question: are all these meetings going to be at this 3 to 4:30 time slot, or is that time slot also being considered?
I think we're going with the 3 to 4:30 because of Griffin's schedule, but also I felt like there was someone else who this worked better for. They found mornings more difficult. Maybe one of the aquaculture guys mentioned that. I can't recall. So I think we're generally aiming for late afternoon.
I can say, unfortunately, that I won't be able to attend the 8th or the 9th, so I'll be away.
Okay.
Jamie,
I'm
I
away
can
the
do
following
either.
week. What was
Um,
that, Tessa?
I can do either, but Wednesday would be better if there's a leaning towards one or the other.
Both are definitely fine with me.
Alrighty, sounds good. I will take that into consideration.
Yeah, I'm good with either too.
Let me just look here real quick. November 9th. Yeah, okay. All right, I think the other thing that I'll do before Lucas and I reach out about, the date and kind of the sign up idea is reorganize this a little bit, but also highlight what things we might want to talk about at the upcoming meetings, so that people have an idea, what topics will be under discussion at these various meetings. I will mention right now that I kind of would like to start the discussion about the barriers, next meeting, our potential barriers, because I feel like that's the one where we might need to do more investigation. I don't think that those are, we don't have nice reports all put together for us on those items. So if we start the discussion soon, we can then identify what we know and what we don't know, and then move from there each week on that topic. Whereas I feel like some of these others, for instance, the current knowledge of the kind of benefits of eelgrass habitat, that could come a little later. We know where to find that information. It's just pulling it together and kind of putting it into the message that we're trying to craft here.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Jamie.
Yeah.
Is identify the things that are going to be difficult. Yeah, I really like that.
Jamie,
All right.
I was just going to suggest one thing before we jump off the phone is most of us in the room are not eelgrass experts. So I'm just wondering if you can think about before our next meeting how to engage the group so that we can contribute in a meaningful way. I mean, I think there's a few things that I can do, but just so the report comes across as something that you could probably write this your own and, not have any contributions from this group. But I think in order for everyone to feel like they have a stake in it, that would be great if you could come back to us and let us know, even if it's just reviewing sections and just to say, is this something that makes sense? Are we all aware and, up to speed on every different topic that you've covered today, especially since we're just a small group today?
Yeah.
But I'm also thinking of the farmers that are involved in this group and may comment outside of this process that finding a way to really engage them and make sure that they feel included is important.
Yeah, so that's a great point. And let me ask a question, because I am, in my own head here in terms of like Larry pointing out, well, shouldn't we mention benefits of eelgrass? Of course we should. But I just didn't even think about it because I know what the benefits are. So I feel like the place, and I'm asking for you guys to give input on this and correct me if it's an improper assumption, but I feel like the place where our group can really get engaged and where I definitely don't have knowledge and strong opinions on is not so much on the benefits, the history, the looking at the change over time, but more on these other questions of preservation. What are our restoration priorities? Not just, do we want to have a booming infrastructure for restoring eelgrass? Is that something that we want? New York and Cornell Cooperative Extension, they do a lot of business restoring eelgrass. Do we want a Connecticut version of that seagrass restoration team? So I think, and then these issues that come up of where we target our eelgrass restoration efforts. I think that's a big one where our group needs to weigh in and where we can engage everyone is what do we need to consider? So we have a site suitability model that only takes into account environmental factors. It doesn't take into account any human uses of the environment and where, even things like mooring fields are not included in that model. So perhaps we say, if you're going to be choosing restoration sites, you need to think about X, Y, and Z, and not just is the temperature good and is the sediment good. So my hope was that we get through this kind of background stuff relatively quickly, possibly at a later meeting, but that's because I'm familiar with it. So do you think it's useful to touch on some of that background benefits of eelgrass a little bit in each meeting, or what I was thinking is that we could write something up on the background of eelgrass and then the group responds to it?
I know I'm not, I'm really just supposed to be guiding you on procedure, but I guess I would suggest that the benefits are presumed based on the legislation that has passed, is what I would say. So I would not want the group to mire itself in that, I guess. that's, since you have such little time kind of to do everything, that would be my suggestion.
I think unless there's a specific recommendation that comes out of the working group that is justified by a particular benefit or ecosystem service. That's, I agree with you, Brad, that we don't need to reinvent the wheel, but I think if we are going to make some recommendations, then having them well-founded is not a bad thing to do.
Jamie, I wonder if we could take just this outline to the fishermen and farmers and others who have been unable to participate and just ask them what they feel strongly about before this is a 100-page document or however long it might be. And that may be an important way to raise their awareness of issues that they may not be aware of, or data or analyses, but also again, to just, kind of get the temperature on how they feel about these topics, whether they're important. And I don't think it would be a terrible idea to potentially include some anecdotes from those people who are often overlooked. I mean, scientists are out in the field and do comparisons from year to year, but these are people that live in that environment, work in that environment, and may pick up on trends that we haven't even thought of, or that we're aware of, but they're just not necessarily documented because they're anecdotal in nature. So just something to consider again during the next
Yeah,
meeting.
I like that idea. And I think I was in the back of my mind getting at it when I mentioned that, what I'd like to do is kind of lay out some of the topics that we're going to be covering at each meeting. But do that as, as a straw poll. So basically, we're thinking of talking about these things at each of the meetings. If you can't be there on December 6th or 7th, and you really want to talk about the topic that's scheduled that day, let us know and we'll move it to another day. So I think that's part of my wanting to kind of clean up the outline a little bit, think about what we might discuss at each meeting, so that people can really say, oh, that's a topic that's important to me, I'm going to be there, or that's a topic that's important to me, I can't make it, let me let them know, and maybe they can change it. Yeah. So, I think when we send out the information to everyone, it'll include a cleaner version of this, and this is more of the messy working document. Of the outline and kind of some of the things that we talked about, and then ask for comments back, especially where people want to be more involved. That's where I was saying, let me think about it a little bit before we send it out, Lucas, because I think I might come up with some kind of, I don't want to make everyone rank something, but what do you think is super important here?
Yeah, no, that's like a good idea. And what I was even thinking, like maybe like something along the lines of like a Google form or something where they could like kind of like rank their interest about this particular section, and like we can kind of go from there. But yes, whatever you think, we'll definitely get that along to them.
Yep, I think that's great. We probably won't get that out to folks until Monday, just so the folks on this call don't think we forgot about it. But, yeah, just so you know. All right, any other last thoughts before we sign off? Let's stop sharing here. All right, then I think we are done for today. I feel like we got a good distance along, and hopefully can make some more progress before our next meeting. Thank you all.
Yep. Thanks, Jamie. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye all.
Bye.